Hi Amington Heath. Today we're going to talk about ordering our fractions. Yesterday you were comparing them using your symbols, and today you're going to take those skills, you're going to apply them a little bit further and use them to help you to order fractions. Now there's several different steps along the way, so we're going to go through each of those so that you can fully understand and you can access your tasks for today. So the first step is when we have a set of fractions that all have the same denominator. So for instance, I might have something like 4 sevenths, and then I might have 2 sevenths, 1 seventh, and 6 sevenths. Now this is the most straightforward step. We've got denominators that are all the same, so all we really need to focus on for this step is to have a look at our numerators. Okay, if I wanted to order these from the smallest through to the largest, I'm going to look at these numerators to help me to understand which one goes where. So I'm going to put a little S and an L there to help me to remember that I'm going smallest through to largest. And I'm going to look at these numerators, and you can see it's quite straightforward. The first one, the number 1 is the numerator there. That is going to be our smallest numerator. If we've got 1 seventh, it is smaller than 2 sevenths. So I'm going to put that first. And what I tend to do is once I've done it, once I've used that fraction, I'll just cross it off so that I don't make a mistake and use it twice by accident. And then I'm going to look at the next set of numerators. I know that the next one along, the next smallest one is 2, so that goes next. And after that, it's going to be my 4 sevenths. And then finally, I've got my 6 sevenths. So I've got them in order using my numerators because my denominator is all the same, and I can clearly see that it goes 1 seventh, then 2 sevenths, 4 sevenths, up to 6 sevenths, which is my largest one. So that's relatively straightforward. Our next step, just clean this off. It's not always as straightforward as that. Sometimes we have different denominators, and that can make it a little bit more complicated depending on whether the numerators are the same or not. So the next step that you might need to look at is fractions with different denominators but the same numerator. So for instance, you might have 1/5, you might have 1/10, you might have 1/2, and you might even have something like a 15th. Okay, so if I look at my numerators here now, I can see that all of them are the same. If I look at my denominators, they're all different. But the important thing to think about with fractions and when we're coming to order them is that we should understand that the bigger the denominator, the smaller the actual fraction is, because you're cutting it into more parts. So actually, the bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction is, and the opposite being that the smaller the denominator, the bigger the size of the fraction. So if I want to order these, I don't need to work anything out again particularly. I can use my understanding of the numerators and the denominators and what that means. I've got one of all of them, so I don't need to worry about my numerators. It could have been the same if I'd had 2 of them all, or I'd had 3 at the top for my numerator in each of those fractions. I wouldn't need to think about them. I just need to focus on my denominator. And if I then want to order them smallest to largest, or even largest to smallest, I use my understanding of this to help me. So I've got my smallest through to my largest again. And because I know that the bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction, I just need to look at that. So my 1/15 is actually my smallest fraction there. And again, I'm going to cross it off so that I know I've used it. And if I look at my denominators again, my next largest denominator is my tenths here, which means that's my next smallest fraction. Crossing it off. And then I've got 1/5. And then finally, in actual fact, the fraction with the smallest denominator is actually the largest fraction. So you can see there it goes from 1/15 to 1/10, 1/5, and then 1/2. And again, that would be my fractions in order. So recapping that one, if your numerator is the same with all of your fractions and your denominators are different, you can look at the denominators and remember that the bigger the denominator, the bigger the number at the bottom, the smaller the fraction actually is. Okay, so the next step gets a little bit more challenging. So I've got 3/10, I've got 4/5, I've got 2/5, and I've got 7/20. Okay, so if I have a look at my fractions here, I've now got fractions with different numerators and different denominators, and this makes it a lot more challenging because now I have to do some calculations in order to change these fractions to the same denominator. So I'm looking for that common denominator, that number that I can put at the bottom that is the same for all the fractions so that I can order them and compare them. Okay, so I'm going to look to find my common denominator. So if I have a look at my denominators on this one, I've got 10, 5, 5 and 20. And using my understanding of my times tables, I know that I can change all of these digits, all of these numbers into, I could go for 20, okay? So I'm going to change all of my fractions into 20ths and give them that 20 as a common denominator so that I can order them easily. So to do that, we're going to take our 3/10 first of all, and I want to change that into 20ths. Okay, so I'm going to use what you used yesterday for comparing your fractions, where I'm going to multiply my 10, and I'm going to change it into 20. I've got to multiply it by 2. So 10 times 2 is equal to 20, and then whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to change my 3, multiply that by 2, and that will make that into 6. So that will give me 6/20. So my equivalent fraction for 3/10 is 6/20. So I'm just going to make a little note of that by the side so that I don't forget. Okay, so I now need to find the equivalent fraction for 4/5 in 20ths. So I'm going to do the same thing, 4/5, and I want to change that into 20ths. I know to change 5 into 20, I'm going to multiply that by 4, and I'm going to do the same to the top. 4 times 4 is 16, so that's actually going to give me 16/20. And my final one that I'm going to have to find the equivalent for, I have 2/5. Again, I want to change it into 20ths, and I know that if I times 5 by 4, it's going to give me 20. And I'll do the same to the top because I've done that to the bottom, and that will give me 8/20. So I can clearly see now I've got 6/20, 16/20, 8/20 and 7/20. So if I want to order these fractions now, it's easy to do. I can see what they all are in 20ths. So I'm going to go from smallest to largest again. I could have gone from largest to smallest. And I'm going to start with my 6/20. I'm not going to write it down as 6/20. When you're comparing these fractions, you need to look at what you found in the equivalent, but write it down in the original fraction. So I know this is the smallest, but originally it was 3/10. So I'm going to write down my 3/10. I'm going to go back and cross it so I know I've done it. If I look now, I've got 16/20, 8/20, 7/20, and my 7/20 is the next one along. I've written 10 there, sorry. No, that's correct. 7/20 because that started as 7/20. And then if I look again, let's cross that out so I don't lose my way. I've got 8/20, but that started as 2/5. So I'm going to put my 2/5 there, cross that out, and then my final one, 16/20 there. So it actually began as 4/5. And then I've done them all, and I've ordered my fractions. So I hope that helps. Remember to use the skills that you learnt yesterday when you were comparing fractions, finding those equivalent fractions, looking for the same denominators, and ordering them accordingly once you've done it. Okay, have a good day. Bye bye.